I don't know what startled me more, the knock on my bedroom door, or the way my heartbeat sprinted, as if it were racing to abandon me. It was the kind of moment when the air feels stolen, as if someone has pressed pause on the world but left your fear running. I remember staring at my reflection, fingers frozen on the edge of a brush, the faint shimmer of foundation dusting my cheekbones like an unfinished confession. I had never felt more exposed in my life. Yet for some reason I couldn't explain, I didn't look away. The mirror didn't lie, though it didn't entirely tell the truth either. It showed me the familiar. The jaw I knew too well, the hesitant eyes, the shoulders that always felt heavier than they looked. But beneath all of that, there was something else, something soft emerging like fog on a cold morning. A suggestion. A possibility. A version of myself that felt too delicate to speak aloud but too real to ignore. My gender is not a jail, I whispered under my breath, surprised at how steady the words came out. I can be even its feminine. The sentence hung in the air like a fragile promise. I didn't know where I first heard it. Maybe I made it up. Maybe it made me up. The knock came again, 3 short taps, hurried, the way people knock when they're not entirely sure they should. I swallowed hard. Just a second. My voice cracked. I winced. I always did when that happened. It felt like someone had tugged the curtain down on the version of myself I was trying to hold up. I hurriedly stuffed the makeup products back into the drawer, though my hands shook so badly that the mascara tube rolled off the table and hit the floor with a soft clatter. The sound was tiny, insignificant, but it echoed inside me with ridiculous intensity. I scrambled to pick it up, suddenly terrified that anyone, even the air, might judge me for owning it. By the time I reached the door, I'd forgotten how to breathe. It swung open before I could grab the handle. My cousin Miriam stood there, eyes bright, eyebrows raised, the kind of expression that sees more than you want it to. She wasn't supposed to be home this early. She wasn't supposed to see anything. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "You look like you just lost an argument with a ghost." "I'm fine," I said too quickly. Too sharp. Too defensive. Her gaze drifted past me, into the room. Into the space where my secret still floated in the air like invisible smoke. "Were you doing something?" My throat tightened. "Just cleaning." Miriam smiled, that knowing little half-smile she had whenever she caught me lying about something stupid, like saying I didn't eat the last slice of cake when the frosting was still on my fingers. But this wasn't cake. This was me. This was the one truth I had no vocabulary for yet. "Well," she said casually, leaning against the doorframe, "if you want to talk. I'm not going anywhere." The worst part wasn't her suspicion. The worst part was the kindness in her voice. I wasn't ready to be treated gently. I didn't think I deserved that kind of softness. A gust of wind drifted through the open window behind me, brushing against my cheek. I could still smell the powder on my skin. And suddenly, it didn't feel shameful. It felt warm, like something that wanted to belong somewhere. "I'm good," I repeated, quieter this time. Miriam nodded, even though neither of us believed the words. She stepped back. "All right. I'll be downstairs." She left. The door closed. And the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was charged, buzzing, like the universe had switched on a neon sign inside my chest that said, "You can't keep pretending forever." I went back to the mirror instinctively. There was something magnetic about it, as if it pulled me in. The faint traces of makeup I hadn't fully wiped off softened the angles of my face, not dramatically, but enough that I could almost imagine a different version of myself looking back, one that wasn't weighed down by expectations, rules, or the quiet fear that I was disappointing some invisible checklist of how to be. It wasn't about trying to look like someone else. It wasn't even about beauty. It was about honesty. There was a tremor in my chest, fear, curiosity, relief. I couldn't separate them. They tangled together like threads of a story I wasn't sure I had permission to write. But the truth was simple, even if I didn't dare say it out loud yet. I liked the way this felt. Not as a disguise. Not as an escape. But as a home I hadn't realized I'd been locked out of. And for the first time, instead of running from that feeling, I let it sit with me. I let it breathe. I let myself breathe. Little did I know that this moment, me alone in a quiet room, with the faint shimmer of makeup still warming my cheeks, would be the first crack in the wall I'd spent my whole life building. A wall that was about to collapse in the most unexpected, terrifying, and beautiful ways. I just didn't know it yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not because something dramatic happened, but because nothing did. The quiet felt heavier than noise, like the universe was waiting for me to admit something to myself. I lay on my back, staring at the faint glow of the ceiling, replaying every second of the evening. Miriam's voice. The makeup still lingering like a secret on my skin. The mirror looking at me, as if it understood something I didn't. The strange part was, nothing actually went wrong. No confrontation. No disaster. No one ripped open the door to expose me. And yet I felt as if I'd stepped too close to the edge of something enormous. Something that didn't care about my timetables or excuses. Around 3 a.m, I sat up, restless. My heart was doing that thing where it beats too fast not because of fear, but because it wants something. Something I kept avoiding naming. I found myself walking to the mirror again, drawn in like gravity had shifted in the room. The faint remnants of foundation from earlier had mostly disappeared, but the feeling hadn't. I picked up the brush again, slowly, like touching something sacred, and let the bristles slide across my skin. The motion was simple, soft, but it felt like pressing my fingers against a truth I'd spent years hiding. There wasn't a dramatic transformation, no movie-style reveal. Just a slow, quiet shift, features softening, breath steadying, eyes becoming a little more open, like they recognized the person emerging. I whispered, "Who are you?" And for the first time, the reflection didn't dodge the question. It felt like she answered, not with words, but with a kind of presence. A subtle but unmistakable sense of there you are. I didn't know whether to smile or cry. I did a little of both. But morning came anyway, stubborn as always. When sunlight slid across my room, reality returned with the usual weight. The brush still on the vanity, the makeup drawer slightly open, my heart still carrying last night's confession like a bruise made of light. Downstairs, Miriam was already in the kitchen, stirring something in a pot. The house smelled like cardamom and early morning comfort. She didn't look up when I walked in, but her voice floated out casually. "Didn't see you come down last night. You okay?" "Yeah." I lied again, though softer this time. She finally turned, her eyes scanning my face, not suspiciously, but attentively. "You look different." My pulse jumped. "Different how?" "More yourself," she said simply. It was such a strange, small sentence. And yet it hit me harder than I expected. How could she see something I hadn't even named yet? Before I could respond, she added, "Feeling different isn't a bad thing." I swallowed, unsure what to say. I wasn't ready to confess anything, not to her, not to anyone, but something in her tone told me I didn't have to. Not yet. She wasn't pushing. She was just there. A gentle presence. A door left cracked open. Over the next week, something subtle began unraveling inside me. Not in one dramatic moment, but in little repeated ones, quiet rebellions I barely noticed until they built up into something undeniable. I found myself taking longer in front of the mirror, not out of vanity, but curiosity. The gentle sweep of foundation, the soft line of eyeliner, the shift it created in how I carried my face, how I carried myself. Each touch felt like a conversation that had been waiting to happen. I wasn't playing dress-up. I wasn't pretending. It felt more like discovering a room in my own house that I never knew existed, but somehow everything inside it felt familiar. One evening, Miriam walked into my room without knocking, a habit she had since childhood, and froze just inside the door. I was mid-brushstroke, eyeliner halfway drawn, my hand suspended like a startled dancer. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. The silence felt so sharp that even breathing seemed dangerous. Then she did the most unexpected thing. She smiled, not a teasing smile, not a knowing one, but a soft, encouraging one that steadied the air between us. "I knew it," she whispered, but not in a triumphant way, more like someone finally recognizing a melody they've been humming their whole life. Heat rushed to my face. It's not. I don't know what it is. I stammered, words tangling like loose threads in my mouth. You don't have to explain it yet, she said gently. But you don't have to hide it from me. Her kindness felt almost unbearable. I'd braced for judgment, a joke, a misunderstanding, anything but acceptance. That softness was the one thing I wasn't prepared for. I don't know what I'm doing, I admitted, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and relief. She stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. You're trying to understand yourself. That's not wrong. Her words felt like a door clicking open inside my ribcage. But the universe, it seemed, never let things stay simple. 2 days later, while I was getting ready, again, in secret, though the secret felt thinner now, I heard raised voices downstairs. A tension in the air. A name. My name. Followed by a sentence that made my blood turn cold. What was he wearing? My heart dropped. Someone had seen me. Not Miriam. Not someone safe. Someone who didn't understand. Someone who might never understand. I froze, brush in hand, breath caught like an animal cornered in its own home. My reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed, half-transformed, half of a truth that suddenly felt fragile again. The fear that surged through me wasn't the quiet, nervous kind. It was sharp, electric, the kind that shakes your bones and makes the world tilt. Because I realized something I hadn't let myself face before. If I stepped toward this truth, everything in my life might change. Not gradually, not gently, but suddenly, irreversibly. I pressed my palm to the vanity to steady myself, the room spinning just enough to scare me. I didn't know who had seen me, what they saw, or what they'd said, but the tone downstairs was unmistakable. This wasn't acceptance. This was the beginning of something I wasn't ready for. Something that would test the exact part of me I had only just begun to uncover. I closed my eyes, inhaled shakily, and whispered the words again. Words that felt even more defiant now. My gender is not a jail. But this time, my voice wavered. Because even though I believed it, I wasn't sure the world around me did. And the footsteps coming up the stairs told me I was about to find out. The footsteps on the stairs felt louder than they should have been, each one landing with the gravity of a warning. I stood frozen in front of the mirror, the eyeliner still hugging only one eye, the other half of my face bare like a confession cut short. My breath felt trapped somewhere between my lungs and my throat, unable to decide whether it wanted to escape or hide. A shadow passed the gap beneath my door. Then a pause. Then another step. I closed the makeup drawer in a slow, shaky motion, the soft click sounding like a gunshot in the quiet. My heart was doing a wild, uneven rhythm that didn't match the stillness of the room. Then came the knock. Not like Miriam's knock, soft, uncertain, curious. This one was heavy, deliberate. The kind of knock people use when they already think they know something about you. I swallowed the fear scraping the inside of my chest and forced my voice into something close to steady. Yes. The door opened before my word even finished. It was my older cousin, Imran, tall, broad-shouldered, someone who always walked like rooms should make space for him. His expression wasn't angry, just confused in that dangerous way. The kind of confusion that looks like it might turn into something harsher if it doesn't get answers. His eyes flicked over my face, taking in the uneven makeup, the scattered brushes on the vanity, the way my hand instinctively covered my cheek as if that could erase the evidence. So it's true, he said, voice low, almost disappointed. I thought maybe they were exaggerating downstairs. But wow. Heat raced to my neck. It's not what you think. He raised an eyebrow. Really? Because it looks exactly like what I think. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a slow, deliberate click. Something in that sound made my stomach drop. Not because he was threatening me, he didn't even look angry. Just unreadable, which somehow was worse. I began, but the words tangled immediately. Imran's gaze softened very slightly, though it still held an edge. Look, I'm not here to yell at you. relax. I just want to understand what's going on. Everyone downstairs is confused and whispering like they saw a ghost. A ghost. Funny how the word hit harder than any insult could. I took a small breath and looked down at my hands, noticing how faint traces of powder clung to my fingertips like stubborn truth. I wasn't trying to. I tried again, voice trembling. I'm just trying to figure some things out. Figure what? He asked, sitting on the edge of my desk as if we were discussing homework, not my entire identity unraveling in my hands. Because whatever this is, it's not small. I hated that he was right. It wasn't small. It felt enormous. A tectonic shift under my skin that I had barely begun to recognize myself. But admitting that felt impossible. So instead, I whispered, I don't know. Maybe the most honest sentence I'd spoken in months. Imran exhaled, rubbing a hand through his hair. Look, I don't get this stuff. Not really. But he hesitated, as if choosing each word carefully. But your family. And I'm not going to let anyone downstairs make this into something ugly. They're confused. And honestly, so am I. But I need to know what you need from me. His voice wasn't warm, but it wasn't cruel. It was something in between, tension wrapped around a thread of reluctant loyalty. And somehow, that small thread made my eyes sting. I just need time, I said quietly. Time to understand myself. Without being treated like I'm doing something wrong. He looked at me long and hard, then nodded once, slow but sure. Okay, he said.
Time. Fine.
But you should talk to Miriam. She seems to understand this, whatever this is, better than the rest of us. A small, shaky laugh escaped me. She walked in on me the other day. Yeah, he said with a smirk. She told me she had a feeling. She always knows before anyone else. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. Just don't hide from her. She's on your side. And whether you believe it or not, so am I. Even if I look confused half the time. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Thank you, I whispered. He shrugged, as if embarrassed by kindness. Don't make it weird. I'm just trying not to let this house blow up. He slipped out, closing the door softly this time, and the silence that followed felt different. Not the heavy, suffocating kind that filled the room earlier, but a calmer one. A breathing space. A thin promise that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as my fear tried convincing me. Still, my hands trembled when I reached for the makeup wipe. Not because I regretted anything, but because I didn't want to erase what I'd created on my face. I didn't want to go back to the blank version of me. Yet something in me whispered, not now. Not yet. Not until the timing is yours. I wiped half of it off and stopped, staring at my reflection, half bold, half restrained. A living metaphor of everything I felt but couldn't say. I knew I needed to talk to Miriam. Not tomorrow. Not later. Tonight. I found her downstairs on the patio, curled up with a blanket and her phone, the faint glow lighting her face. When she saw me, she put the phone down immediately. You heard, she said softly. Not a question. Yeah, I replied. Imran came up. A flicker of worry crossed her face. Did he? No, I said quickly. He was decent. Confused, but decent. She nodded, relief loosening her shoulders. I sat beside her, pulling my knees close, the night air carrying a chill that felt grounding. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, You don't have to say anything until you're ready. But if you want to, I'm here. My eyes burned again, but I blinked the tears away before they formed. I don't know what's happening to me. I began softly. It's like every time I try on makeup or even just see myself differently, something feels right. More right than anything else has in years. But at the same time, it scares me. Because I don't know what it means. And I don't know how far it goes. Miriam didn't interrupt. She didn't stroke my back or give me a speech. She just listened, fully, quietly, respectfully. And I don't want to be mocked, I continued. Or turned into a joke. Or treated like I'm broken. Her eyes softened. You're not broken. I feel like I'm becoming someone I didn't plan to be. She paused, then said something I'll never forget. Maybe you're becoming the person you were meant to be. And maybe the only thing that was ever broken was the fear that kept you from meeting them. I exhaled shakily, the tension releasing in uneven waves. The night wrapped around us like a gentle witness. And as I leaned my head on her shoulder, hesitant at first, then trusting, I realized something that scared me and comforted me all at once. I couldn't stop this journey, even if I wanted to. It had already begun. And somewhere inside me, a quiet voice whispered that I was finally walking toward myself, even if I didn't yet know where the path would lead. I didn't expect change to feel so quiet. The next few days passed like a slow-moving river, steady, gentle, but carrying something deeper beneath the surface. Even the air around me felt different, as if my secret had reshaped the gravity of the house. No one said anything openly, but subtle shifts were everywhere. A pause in conversation when I entered a room. A look that lasted a second too long. A whisper that stopped the moment footsteps approached. And through all of it, Miriam stayed close, not hovering, not intruding, just appearing in the right moments like some quiet force of nature positioned exactly where I needed her. One afternoon, she knocked on my door, then opened it halfway with a cautious smile. "I'm going out," she said. "Want to come with me?" "To where?" She shrugged. "Just out. Away from all this." Her hand made a vague circle in the air, as if she were gesturing at the walls themselves. I didn't want to go. I also didn't want to stay. There's a strange kind of exhaustion that comes from being observed when you aren't ready to be visible. So, I nodded. We ended up taking a long bus ride, sitting near the back where conversations felt softer. The city shimmered outside the windows, sunlight brushing against rooftops, clotheslines, billboards, the restless flow of everyday life. People walked past us, lost in their own storms and stories, and I suddenly felt relief in the anonymity of it all. Here, no one was staring. No one was whispering. The air was just air. Miriam eventually spoke, her tone casual but her eyes sharp and searching. "So, how have you been feeling?" "Really?" A simple question, but it cracked something open. "I feel like I'm living between two versions of myself," I admitted. One that the world recognizes, and one I barely understand yet. And I keep shifting between them like I'm flickering. She nodded thoughtfully. "Which one feels more like home?" The answer rose in my chest before I had time to be afraid of it. "The second one," I whispered. She smiled, not triumphant, not surprised, just deeply, softly understanding. "Then maybe that's the one you're meant to grow into." I didn't reply. My throat was too tight. We got off the bus near a quiet market area, the kind filled with small shops and narrow walkways and old women selling fabric rolls in colors that looked like bottled sunsets. Miriam guided me through the stalls, not telling me where we were going. Then she stopped in front of a shop I recognized, a tiny place that sold cosmetics, scarves, hair accessories, little things that always caught my eye but never my footsteps. I froze. "Miriam, what is this?" She didn't answer. She just held the door open. I stepped inside. The air smelled like rose water and talc, and the walls were lined with shades of possibility, silvers, browns, soft pinks, bold reds. Things I had never allowed myself to imagine owning, let alone touching. My chest tightened with a confusing rush of excitement and fear. Miriam whispered, "Choose one thing." I shook my head instantly. "I can't. What if someone sees? What if?" "Hey," she said gently. "Nobody here knows you. Nobody here cares. It's just you. You get to choose something for yourself for once." Her words sank into me like warm water. I walked slowly between the aisles, fingertips hovering over the displays, but not quite touching. Each color, each compact, each brush felt like a question. Then I saw it. A soft, muted rose lipstick, gentle, not flashy, something that whispered instead of announced. My hand trembled as I picked it up. A tiny cylinder of color, something ordinary to the world but monumental to me. "You like it?" Miriam asked. I nodded, unable to speak. She took it from my hand, walked to the counter, and bought it before I could protest. Outside, she handed the small bag to me. A breeze moved between us, lifting strands of her hair. "It's yours," she said. "No hiding. No taking it back." I held the bag like it contained something fragile and luminous, like it contained a part of my future I never thought I'd be brave enough to hold. On the bus ride home, I kept my hand inside the bag, fingers curled around the small tube as if anchoring myself to a truth I was terrified to lose. But the peace didn't last long. When we walked through the front door, the atmosphere in the house shifted instantly. A storm sat waiting inside the silence. My aunt stood in the living room, arms crossed, eyes sharp with worry or judgment. I couldn't tell which. A few other relatives were scattered around, their faces heavy with things they hadn't decided whether to say aloud. Miriam tensed beside me. Then my aunt spoke. "Sit down," she said to me. "We need to talk." The words landed like stones. I felt the blood drain from my face. The bag in my hand suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. Miriam immediately stepped forward. "If this is going to be a lecture, then I'm staying." "No," my aunt interrupted, her tone stern but not shouting. "Both of you sit." We sat. She looked at me for a long, unbearable moment. Then she asked cautiously, "What is happening with you lately?" My heart thrashed against my ribs. "Nothing," I said weakly. "That's not true," she replied. "People are talking. They're concerned. They're saying you've been acting strange. Dressing strange." A cold shock ran down my spine. She hesitated, then added softly, "And I want to understand before anyone outside this family misunderstands." I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming to hide, to shrink, to lie. But beside me, Miriam's hand found mine, steady, warm, quiet. And somehow, that tiny gesture held me in place. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. "I'm just trying to understand myself," I whispered. My aunt's expression shifted, not softer, but less rigid, like she was seeing confusion instead of defiance. "And what does that mean?" she asked carefully. I didn't answer.
I didn't know how to.
But before I could drown in panic, a voice from the doorway spoke.
"Ron."
"It means," he said, stepping forward, "he's figuring himself out. And we're not going to make things worse by turning him into a spectacle." The room stilled. My aunt blinked, surprised. "Imran?" "No," he said firmly. "Whatever he's going through, we don't have to attack him for it." The silence that followed was sharp and fragile.
And I
didn't breathe for several seconds. Because in that moment, for the first time, I realized something huge, something overwhelming. I had allies, not because they fully understood me, not because they knew what I was becoming, but because they cared enough to stand between me and the world while I learned how to stand for myself. My aunt finally sighed, a long, conflicted, exhausted sigh, and sat down. "We'll talk later," she said. "When you're ready." And just like that, the tension cracked, not entirely gone but no longer crushing.
I didn't speak.
I couldn't. But when we went upstairs, Miriam squeezed my hand and whispered, "You're not alone. Remember that." And that night, lying awake with the rose lipstick hidden beneath my pillow, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not courage,
Not certainty.
but possibility. A tiny flare of light in a room that had been dark for years. I didn't expect a single object small enough to disappear in my palm, to change the rhythm of my days. But the rose lipstick Miriam bought for me did exactly that. It wasn't just a color. It wasn't even about the makeup itself. It was the meaning woven into it, the quiet declaration that I was allowed to want something, to explore something, to exist in a version of myself that didn't fit the template everyone thought I should follow. I kept it under my pillow at first, not to hide it, though fear still lingered in my thoughts, but because having it close felt grounding, like a small pulse of truth vibrating against the fabric while I slept. Some nights, I held it tightly in my hand, my fingers curled around it as the world beyond my room blurred into silence. Knowing it was there made everything feel less uncertain. The house was quieter after the tense talk with my aunt. Not peaceful, but cautious. Like everyone had agreed to hold their judgments somewhere behind their backs rather than in their hands. I wasn't naive enough to believe everything was resolved, but the storm clouds had thinned just enough for sunlight to sneak through the cracks. It was 2 days later, when the next shift happened. I was alone in my room, the door locked, not out of rebellion, but protection. The afternoon light filtered in soft and golden, painting the room with colors that looked warm enough to touch. I sat in my vanity, the lipstick resting on the table in front of me like a tiny heartbeat. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. I twisted the tube slowly, watching the color rise like a quiet sunrise. I could feel my chest tightening, not with fear exactly, but with anticipation that felt older than me. I had put on makeup before, small things, hesitant lines, and soft brushes, but this felt different. This felt like stepping beyond a threshold. I leaned closer to the mirror. My reflection stared back, nervous, hopeful, uncertain. Half buried, half emerging. I pressed the lipstick gently to my bottom lip, and something inside me exhaled. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a transformation that would make anyone gasp. It was small, subtle, just a soft shade of rose warming my mouth. But the moment the color settled, I felt something inside my chest click into place. Like a puzzle piece I had been searching for without knowing it. I whispered to myself, half out loud, half inside my head, "There you are." But the peace didn't last long. A sudden knock on the door snapped me out of the trance. My heart leaped. "Who is it?" "It's me."
Imran.
I wiped the lipstick quickly, but not well enough. Its faint hue still clung to the edges of my mouth like a quiet rebellion. I shoved the tube into the drawer and inhaled shakily before unlocking the door. He stepped in, holding something black and rectangular in his hand. "My phone." "You left this downstairs," he said. Then he paused, studying me with eyes that noticed more than I wished they did. "You okay? You look flushed." I swallowed. "Just warm." He didn't sound convinced. But he didn't push. Instead, he handed me my phone and glanced around the room, as people do when they want to avoid a topic but can't ignore it fully. After a moment, he said, "I talked to Mom again." My stomach clenched. "She's trying," he added. "Don't expect her to understand everything overnight, but she's trying." "That's not nothing." I nodded. "I know." He hesitated, then asked the question I feared most. "Do you want to tell her what you're thinking? Or who you're trying to be?" The words hit me like cold water. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I didn't even know how to put the truth into a sentence yet. The version of myself I was discovering didn't have a name, a label, or a neat explanation. All I had were feelings, sensations, fleeting moments in the mirror where I felt more me than I ever had before. Imran read the silence.
He sighed.
"Look, you don't have to decide anything now," he said. "I didn't mean to corner you." Then he added quietly, "I just don't want this to break you." The sincerity in his voice startled me. "I'm not breaking," I said softly. "I'm unfolding." He blinked at the word. "Unfolding."
"Yeah."
I exhaled, like something that was folded too tight for too long. He didn't fully understand, but I saw something shift in his expression, respect, maybe, or acceptance. A willingness to stand beside something he couldn't name. He nodded. "Okay, if that's what you feel, then I'm with you." It was a simple sentence, but it felt monumental. After he left, I locked the door again, not out of fear this time, but because the moment I had been interrupted wasn't finished. I returned to the vanity, the faint rose still visible. I didn't erase it. I added a touch more. As I stared at myself, at the softened shape of my mouth, at the quiet confidence blooming where panic used to live, I felt something loosen in my chest. A truth that had been whispering for weeks finally stepped into the light. I liked myself this way. Not because I looked prettier. Not because I was imitating someone. But because the person in the mirror felt true. Felt real. Felt like someone I could learn to love. It was a dangerous feeling, because truth is always dangerous when you've lived in hiding. It demands choices. It demands honesty. It demands that you stop running. And that evening, as the sun sank behind the rooftops and the room settled into a soft dimness, I made a quiet promise to myself. I wasn't going to shrink anymore. Not into expectations. Not into fear. Not into someone else's idea of who I should be. Later, after dinner, Miriam caught my eye across the room. She must have sensed something in my posture, in the way I held myself, just slightly taller, slightly steadier. She approached me when others weren't listening. "You look lighter," she whispered.
Do I?
"You do." Like something clicked. I smiled, small, real, uncontrollable. Maybe it did. But she wasn't smiling.
Not this time.
Instead, she looked at me with a seriousness that sent a ripple of unease through the air. "What's wrong?" I asked. She hesitated. "Something happened today." My pulse quickened. "What happened?" She bit her lip. "Someone outside the family heard things."
Saw something.
"I'm not sure yet, but I think rumors are starting." My breath stalled. Rumors. The one thing I wasn't prepared for. The one thing that could turn all of this from a quiet personal journey into a public spectacle I wasn't ready to face. I felt my heartbeat stutter, a cold wave washing over the small courage I'd gathered.
Who?
I whispered. She shook her head. "I don't know yet, but we need to be careful." The word careful echoed inside me like a warning bell. And suddenly, the rose lipstick under my pillow felt less like a treasure and more like a target. The quiet unfolding inside me wasn't happening in a vacuum anymore. The world was starting to notice. And the next chapter, whatever it held, would not remain hidden for long. I didn't sleep that night.
Not really.
I drifted somewhere between dreaming and remembering, staring at the ceiling as the pale morning light slowly crept into the room. My mind kept replaying everything: Amara's unwavering smile, the warmth in her voice when she said I wasn't broken, that there was nothing shameful about wanting to be seen differently. Her words settled into me like the first breath after surfacing from underwater. But somehow, that breath didn't feel like relief yet. It felt like the beginning of something I had no map for. When the alarm finally buzzed, I flinched as if my own phone was accusing me. I silenced it and sat up. The room looked the same as always, familiar, unbothered, unchanged. But I didn't feel the same. There was a trembling inside me, the kind you get right before you open a door you've avoided for years. I got ready slowly, half expecting the mirror to sabotage me.
It didn't.
It just reflected a face that was tired and unsure, but also quietly determined. I put on the moisturizer Amara had insisted I try. "Hydration is your new religion," she had joked, and I swear my skin looked a little less dull. A small difference, microscopic even, but enough to make my pulse stir with something almost like hope. School felt louder than usual, like every voice echoed with too much detail. Every hallway seemed narrower. I kept expecting someone to stare right through me, like my thoughts were leaking into the air. But no one noticed anything. People talked about grades, gossip, weekend plans, normal things that suddenly felt like they belonged to another universe. Then lunch came, and that was when the world shifted again. I sat at my usual table trying to swallow food that felt like chalk. Amara and Noor joined me, their conversation rolling as if they had rehearsed it. They were talking about a charity show happening next month, a fundraising event with music, art, and performances. Something about their excitement made me shrink in my seat. I didn't want attention. I didn't want eyes on me. I barely wanted my own reflection on me. Then Amara turned to me with that same soft but sharp intuition she always had. "You ever think about doing something for the show?" she asked casually, sipping her juice. But her eyes were studying me in a way that felt intentional. I laughed reflexively. "Me?
No.
Why would I?" "Because," she said, leaning forward, "you're hiding behind yourself. And sometimes the best way to step into the light is through something creative. Something safe. Something that lets you rewrite your own image without actually saying anything out loud." My heart stumbled. "You're assuming I have anything to rewrite." She didn't even blink. "You do. And that's okay." Noor tapped her pen against the table thoughtfully. "It doesn't have to be performing. It could be makeup or styling or helping backstage. Anything that lets you be around people who actually appreciate self-expression." Self-expression. The phrase felt like both an invitation and a test. I tried to answer, but the air felt thick. My throat tightened. I stared down at my hands, at the faint shimmer on the back of them from Amara's moisturizer. That small shimmer suddenly felt like a confession. "I don't know if I belong in something like that," I whispered. "You don't need permission to belong," Noor said quietly. "Just a starting point." The bell rang, but their words followed me through each class like shadows with their own intentions. And by the end of the day, I was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally, like every thought had been stretched thin. When I finally got home, I dropped my bag and sat at my desk, staring at the little makeup samples Amara had slipped into my pocket earlier. The blush, the tiny tube of concealer, the lip tint with a barely there shade. They were small, harmless things. They didn't demand an identity. They didn't accuse or declare anything. They just sat there, waiting. My hands shook a little as I picked up the lip tint. I uncapped it, hesitating. I didn't want to turn into someone else. I didn't want to replace myself. I just wanted to feel like I had permission to explore what was already inside me. So I applied the faintest bit, just enough for a warmth to bloom at the center of my lips. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't bold. It was barely even visible. But it changed everything. Because for the first time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I felt like I was visiting a version of myself I had always suspected existed, but never dared to greet. My voice came out in a trembling whisper as I studied my reflection. "This isn't wrong," I said. "This is just me." And hearing my own voice say it was the most terrifying and liberating moment of my life. Just then, I heard footsteps outside my room, someone coming down the hallway. Panic burst in my chest. I wiped the tin off as fast as I could, but I wasn't fast enough to erase the glow it had awakened inside me. The door handle turned. My heart froze. Everything was about to change again. The door opened so slowly it felt like time itself was holding its breath. My chest locked, my hands instinctively hiding behind my back, even though there was nothing left to hide except the trembling in my fingers. My mom stepped halfway into the room, her expression soft but scanning, as if she'd walked in on an invisible storm. "Hey," she said gently. "You didn't answer when I called you. Everything okay?" I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." She didn't leave. She leaned against the doorframe instead, watching me with eyes that seemed to see things I didn't want anyone to notice. I tried to keep my breathing calm, but there was this burning fear inside me, not of being caught, but of being misunderstood, of ruining the fragile courage that had taken me all afternoon to build. Her gaze drifted around the room, then back to me. "You seem different today." That single word ricocheted inside my skull, different. Not wrong, not suspicious. Just different. But my mind twisted it anyway. I forced a small smile. "Just a lot on my mind." She nodded as if she expected that. "Teenage life," she murmured with a half-smile that didn't quite land. Then she pushed herself upright. "Dinner will be ready soon." She lingered one more second, long enough that I felt seen in a way that wasn't entirely comfortable. Then she closed the door carefully, as if she didn't want to disturb something fragile on the other side. When she was gone, I exhaled so hard my ribs ached. I sat on the edge of my bed, burying my face in my hands. I didn't know why I felt shaken. She hadn't said anything harsh or suspicious. But I realized it wasn't her. It was me. The closeness of being discovered, even by someone who loved me, felt like standing on the edge of a rooftop without a railing. I wasn't ready to be observed. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. I needed my inner world to be mine alone a little longer. Later that night, after dinner and the small talk routine that felt strangely heavy, I returned to my room and locked the door. I sat at my desk again, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. The city lights flickered faintly outside, their glow faint but persistent, like distant hopes refusing to disappear. That's when I made a decision. If I couldn't bring myself to speak my truth out loud, I would let my truth speak quietly, through actions, through exploration, through gentle steps no one else had to witness. I reached for my phone and typed a message to Amara.
"Hey."
About the charity show, can you tell me more about the backstage stuff? Like helping with styling, maybe. The typing dots appeared so fast it startled me. I knew it, she wrote.
Yes.
Come tomorrow after class. I'll explain everything. Proud of you. My throat tightened.
Proud.
It felt like a word I wasn't sure I deserved, yet desperately needed. I didn't answer, just set my phone down and let the warmth of her message linger. The next day passed in a blur, but a good kind. My steps felt lighter, even though no one else could possibly sense why. When the final bell rang, I walked to the art room where the charity team was meeting. My hands were damp with nerves, but curiosity pushed harder than fear. Amara spotted me instantly and waved me over with an excitement that made something in my chest loosen. There was a small group of students organizing clothes on racks, sorting makeup kits, bending cardboard into backdrops. The chaos looked purposeful, like everyone belonged here, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a stranger looking in. We need help organizing outfits, Amara said, placing a hand on my shoulder, just briefly, but long enough for me to feel grounded. Think you're up for that? I nodded, surprised by how natural it felt. I started sorting through the clothes, labeling hangers, arranging pieces by color. Fabrics brushed my skin, soft chiffon, structured denim, gentle cotton, and each texture awakened something warm and familiar in me. Something that whispered, "You've always liked this. You just never gave yourself permission." As we worked, conversations flowed around me, laughing, planning, debating designs. No one questioned my presence. No one studied me with suspicion. I was simply part of the space, part of the momentum. Then, while I was adjusting the neckline on a mannequin wearing a pale lavender dress, I felt someone watching. Not with judgment, but curiosity. I turned. It was Noor. She approached slowly, her eyes thoughtful in that analytical way of hers. "You're good at this," she said. I shrugged awkwardly. "Just organizing."
No.
"You're noticing details other people skip." She nodded toward the mannequin. "You fixed the drape at the shoulder without even thinking about it. Most people wouldn't catch that."
I didn't know what to say.
Praise never sat easily in me. It always felt like wearing a shirt that didn't fit quite right. But her voice wasn't praise exactly. It was observation. Truth spoken gently. For a second, she hesitated. Then she asked a question that landed like a stone dropped into a quiet lake. "Does being here feel right to you? Not are you okay? Not why are you here? But does this feel right?" Something inside me cracked open, soft and slow. I swallowed. "Yeah," I whispered. Kind of more than I expected. Her expression brightened in a way that wasn't loud, but deeply sincere.
Good.
Then stay. That night, walking home, the air felt different. Lighter, as if the sky itself had loosened its grip on me. When I reached my room, I stood in front of the mirror again. But this time, instead of searching for flaws or signs of guilt, I saw someone beginning to step into their own skin, not as a performance, not as a secret rebellion, but as a quiet unveiling. I touched my lips, remembering the soft tint from yesterday. I didn't apply anything this time. I didn't need to. The change wasn't on my face. It was somewhere deeper, blooming in the parts of me I had kept silent for too long. As I turned off the lights, an unexpected thought settled into me, warm and frightening and honest. Maybe my gender isn't a cage. Maybe it's a doorway. And maybe I'm finally learning how to walk through it. I don't think I realized how fast things were changing until the day everything collided at once. It started quietly, the way storms sometimes begin with a single restless breeze. I had been spending more afternoons backstage with the charity team, learning how to pin fabrics, adjust silhouettes, blend foundation shades, and coax stubborn zippers into cooperation. Day by day, the room became more than a workspace. It became a sanctuary. A place where identity wasn't questioned, only expressed. And yet, even as I moved deeper into this new world, I kept a careful distance around myself. I laughed, I helped, I learned, but I never revealed the truth growing inside me. Not completely.
Not openly.
Until the dress incident. It was a week before the show. We were final testing outfits, and one of the models hadn't arrived. They needed someone with similar measurements to try on a lavender dress. Yes, the same one I had adjusted on the mannequin that first day. I tried to step back, to hide behind tasks, to blend into the shadows of the room. But Amara spotted me with that intuitive radar she seemed born with. "You're the closest size," she said, pointing gently. "Can you help?" Just for fitting. The words hit me like a quiet bolt. I opened my mouth to protest, but nothing came out. Fear and longing tangled together in my chest. Everyone was busy, rushing around. No one was staring at me. No one was waiting for a dramatic reaction. So I nodded. My voice barely cooperated. "Sure." I stepped behind a divider with Amara and Noor. My hands trembled as they handed me the dress. I traced the fabric once, feeling the softness rub against my fingertips, feeling the echo of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. It wasn't about femininity. It wasn't about pretending to be someone else. It was about truth, mine, quiet and unpolished. I slipped the dress over my shoulders. The world went silent. It wasn't tight. It wasn't loose. It was simply right in a way that made something behind my ribs expand and ache at the same time. The neckline framed my collarbone, the color softened the harshness of my expression, and the flow of the skirt whispered around my legs like a secret coming home. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Noor exhaled softly. "You look peaceful." That word struck harder than any compliment. Peaceful. Like she wasn't looking at a costume, but a truth I had never allowed myself to consider wholeheartedly. Amara touched my sleeve, her voice gentle but steady. "How do you feel?" I looked at my reflection in the standing mirror, at the figure staring back. It wasn't a girl. It wasn't a boy. It was me, finally unfiltered. "I feel." My throat tightened, like I've been holding my breath for years. The divider wasn't fully closed. A breeze stirred it just enough for someone outside to catch a glimpse. I didn't notice until I stepped out to check the dress under better lighting and froze. 3 students were staring. Not with disgust. Not with mockery.
With shock, yes.
But also confusion. Curiosity. Uncertainty. My chest collapsed inward. The air vanished. My hands twitched toward the zipper, instinctively trying to hide, undo, erase the moment. The old reflexes, the ones shaped by shame, by fear, by years of silence, roared back to life. But before I could move, Amara stepped in front of me like a shield. Her voice didn't waver. "Is there a problem?" The 3 students exchanged glances, mumbled something, and backed away. No taunts. No laughter. They just didn't know what to do with what they saw. Honestly, neither did I. When they disappeared down the hall, my breath finally stumbled back into my lungs. "I shouldn't have done this," I whispered. "This was a mistake. I shouldn't." "Look at me," Amara said, stepping closer. Her tone was calm but firm. "Nothing about this was a mistake." Noor nodded. "People stare at things they don't understand. That's their limitation, not yours." But I shook my head, feeling everything crumble inside. "I'm not brave like you two. I don't want attention. I don't want people talking. I just wanted to." I swallowed hard. To feel real. For once. Amara's voice softened. "You did. You do." I felt tears prick at the edges of my eyes. Not dramatic ones, just the kind that gather quietly, the kind that come from finally confronting something you've avoided naming. "I don't know who I am yet," I said, my voice barely audible. "But when I wore this, I felt closer to something. Something I can't explain." "You don't need to explain it," Noor said. "You just need to allow it." And for the first time, I let myself cry, not out of sadness, but relief. A slow, quiet release of all the tension I had been carrying like armor. They didn't hug me. They didn't rush me. They just stood with me, grounding me with their presence, letting me breathe until my shoulders loosened again. When I finally changed out of the dress, folding it carefully like it was something sacred, Amara touched my hand lightly. "You don't have to be anything today," she whispered. "Not a label, not a statement, not a revelation. Just keep taking the steps that feel honest." That's all identity is, truth in motion. Truth in motion. Those words settled in me like a seed. The charity show came and went. I never wore the lavender dress again. Not because I was ashamed, but because it had already done its job. I worked backstage the entire night, quietly steady, quietly present, quietly myself. People complimented my styling choices. They asked for help with eyeliner, with accessories, with fabric flow. Not once did anyone look at me the way those 3 students had. And for the first time, I didn't worry about shadows in the room or whispers around the corner. I just existed. And existing felt like victory. At the end of the night, when the crowd had left and the music faded into the floors, I stood alone on the dim stage. The empty chairs looked like a sea of quiet possibilities. I closed my eyes and let the silence wrap around me. I felt the same warmth I had felt the day I applied that faint lip tint. The same relief I felt when I saw myself in the mirror wearing lavender. The same courage that whispered through me each time I dared to explore who I might become. And then I said it, from somewhere deep, steady, and new, my gender is not a jail. The words floated into the empty room. I can be its feminine. I can be its quiet. I can be its question. I open my eyes. And I can still be me. There was no applause.
No spotlight.
No grand revelation. Just a soft, profound understanding settling into my chest like a sunrise. I wasn't done discovering myself. Not even close. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the discovery anymore. I wasn't afraid of softness. I wasn't afraid of expression. I wasn't afraid of wanting to be seen differently. I wasn't afraid of my own reflection. I stepped off the stage slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle into me like a chapter closing gently, not with finality, but with promise. A promise that whatever came next, I would walk toward it honestly. Truth in motion.